Sahara TV, reaching you back live again, and as we promised, we're going to keep exploring issues that affects the African continent in a way that you cannot even imagine. As you're all aware, right now, Africans in Senegal, city of Dakar, Senegal, are fighting to prevent a dictator from taking over power the third time through a third time project. And whenever Africa goes that crazy way, there's always some kind of support from the West. The person who, one of the supporters of Mr. Abdullah Wade this time around is none other than Congressman Charles Rangel, someone who prides himself as a civil rights activist. He's been supporting him, and we tried all the best we can to get him to come on the show and defend why he supports an 85-year-old man to come back and take over power in Senegal when there are tons of young people and his time has expired. Well, Congressman Charles Rangel said, well, I don't want to be put on the spot on Sahara reporters. Wow, that's interesting. But we got somebody in younger blood who's going to show not only Congress Charles Rangel out of power, way out of the Congress, but also help show Abdoulaye Wade and his likes on the continent out of power in a responsible and peaceful way. And we have Craig Schley, who is the congressional candidate for the Democratic Party, U.S. Democrat as they call them, in the 15th district. Primary is June 26th, and he says, well, we're not campaigning for him, and we really don't care whether he wins or loses, but he has got some interesting things to say about power relations between African Americans and Africans. You're welcome to our show.
Well, thank you, Brother Swan.
Craig, yes.
And I say to Sahara Report and all of Senegal, Nagadef, Assalamu alaikum.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
You're welcome. And as we say in Yoruba, Ekabo.
Akabo?
Yes,
right.
That's Yoruba.
Did I say that? Did I say that right?
Right, yes.
Right.
So we got to test your DNA. But let's go back to the DNA of politics in Africa, which is that we just have been laden with African dictators, people who have been in power for decades and refuses to leave when it's time to leave. And unfortunately, we have some of our African American brothers providing support and lifeline to this dictatorship, and it riles Africans a lot to understand that African Americans who otherwise have fought for their own freedom, determined that black people can vote and black people deserve dignity, and have gotten us where we are today, to the extent that the first president of the U.S., outside of a white man, is a black man today. Africans are really upset that this is happening. Why are our African American brothers doing this to us?
Well, first I want to say something that is universal regarding dictatorships. It doesn't matter what culture, what race, what nation, when one stays in power that length of time, it becomes corrupt. And here in America, Frederick Douglass said, absolute power is corrupt. And the only way you change it is realizing that power does not concede to anything other than power. And it's not a matter of they should leave. We have to take it and drag them out. And that's part of the political process, and we're not going to shrink from it one bit, not in Africa and not here.
When you say not in Africa, I can count the number of African countries that have dictators. And we have countries like Zimbabwe. But it is a well-known fact that one of the greatest supporters of the Zimbabwean president, that's Mugabe,
right,
is the African American community. They just love him because he knows how to insult, white people at the United Nations. Is it deserved? Is it fair to love somebody simply because of his rhetoric and forget that he oppresses some people?
Well, I think it's unfair to say that the African Americans just love dictators. Again, just like in Africa, the media tends to spotlight those in power who have control over the mic, that don't actually resonate what the people think. We feel just like the masses of people over there feel that, we need this generation, this world, this universe, its voice has to be heard. And no, we don't condone dictatorships. I don't think by and large the group of people that I'm representing in our district are not supportive of that. And we're not supportive of people staying in office here in the United States for 2 or 3 generations.
You come from a district which is in Harlem,
Right.
I understand, mostly, lightly, or Harlem. And this district has a lot of Senegalese people. In fact, the best restaurant in New York City is in Harlem.
Oh.
I mean, from a Senegalese restaurant. Tell us, give us an idea of how many Africans you think, African nations are there in Harlem, and where we can find, apart from Senegalese people, where we can find other African populations in Harlem, your district, and how much importance you place on them in this campaign.
Well, one, you can find them at the good Senegalese restaurants.
Yes.
That's the first thing. Number two, Little Africa in Harlem in the 15th Congressional District, and there by extension, New York City, has been identified right there on 116th Street. President Drame, recently elected there, is doing a good job representing the Senegalese Association, and that's where they are, and that's a very strong community. But I do want to say this. You talked about a large group of Senegalese there. Well, you have Ghanaian there, you have the Liberia people there, but this is what's real important for all of us to understand. The Africans and African Americans, that since slavery, Africans has not been in the same area in a critical mass as African Americans since slavery. And we have to relearn ourselves, take advantage of our natural immigrants, take advantage of the opportunity of doing relations and business relations with our community in Senegal, with our community in Ghana, our community in Liberia. This is the advantage, and this is the opportunity, and this becomes also the political dynamite that we use to reform all of our environments and to get rid of the so-called dictators.
One of the things that people are going to be asking is, like, why do you allow congressmen in the U.S. to be in power for several decades? And then we turn around and condemn African leaders who want to change constitution. Why don't you have congressional candidates or congressional leaders or congressmen in the U.S. just do 2 terms? Why is it? I mean, that's how we came to having Congressman Charles Rango, who I felt has gone through the full circle. He's been good, bad, and now obviously ugly.
Well, Brother Sharari, I'm not for term limits.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely for people saying, I'm tired of something. If you want to change it, you organize, do the hard work that every generation should, and remove the people in power. If you put in term limits, you don't necessarily get a genuine echo of where the people's mindset are, what they want to do, and they also have to do something to say we're involved in the process. How someone can stay in office is a little broader issue, but I'm going to condense it like this. I have a concept called political solvency. That's an international concept with international relations, but it also works in residential areas. In that, a community should be able to have its ability to produce a candidate, financially support a candidate, put the candidate in office, and make sure that candidate responds to the people, and then if they don't, remove them. In order to do that, the area has to have jobs. It has to be educated to the functioning level of society, and when it doesn't, it opens the door for people to stay in office for a long time, because the people don't have, in America at least, and I would also say in Senegal, have the financial resources to replace them. Because when they get into office, if the people who elected them into office don't have enough resources to control them, someone else co-opts their office by paying for their re-elections, and therefore the interests are taken from the people to larger conglomerates or corporations. And that's what happened here, and that's what I would say probably is happening in Senegal and other dictatorships.
Viewers, just let you know that we invited Congressman Charles Rango to come here today, and he declined our invitation on the grounds that he thinks we'll put him on the spot. And it makes me wonder, if you're doing the right thing, why you're afraid to speak to the people. But there's also a greater question. We've had recently a congressman in New Orleans,
Right.
or yes, convicted of crime related to Africa. There's tons and tons of complaints about, if another public persona in the U.S., uh, Andrew Young, doing shady business on the continent of Africa, helping to promote
What kind of business?
shady. They
Oh,
said,
okay.
helping to promote African dictators, through a variety of schemes. I've had cause to challenge him in my writing before that he no longer represents the aspiration of freedom on the continent of Africa. So again, people want to ask, how do we have some kind of a coherent voice in which we can work together to put an end to dictatorship of African American leadership here. We're talking about a congressman who has been in power forever and has spent out all his limits, goodwill, and apparently his sense of judgment seems to be dithering at this point. And of course, on the continent of Africa, we have tons of African leaders who have become very, very dangerous, not only to democracy but the aspiration of their own people. How do we come together, apart from just feeling good about African food and African clothes? How do we come together in spirit?
Well, first, we should make no distinction between neocons and negrocons. Okay. Simply put, anyone, again, that stays in office that length of time, that's not providing resources for their community to be economically strengthened, sets up an environment that they then start serving, the people in power start serving those who have power and money. That's natural. Money will do what money does. Money wants to produce money and control. That's what they do. But it's our job as the people on the bottom coming up, trying to forge a way for the people in the world to do better, is to control and work together. Now, regarding the African American leaders, let's say, not being beholding or not recognizing the needs of Africans coming to America, that's something that we in Africa and we here in the African Americans have to work together and make them do what we want them to do. We have to reclaim our right as a people, reclaim our interest, and say we're going to do something together. When those two cultures amalgamate our interests, and then we start doing business, through business we define what they say African Americans don't have, and that's an agenda. Political agendas come from the natural business that they do. If I could just give you one example. If I were a representative coming out of Chinatown, I would certainly make sure that rice down in Chinatown is nice and cheap. Everything that has to do with the Chinese stores and everything that has to do with that culture, I would have to make sure is provided for. That's the agenda. Now here, if you're not supporting what African Americans and Africans need, like for instance, bona fide immigration protections, a way to take the Africans, and I mean all of us from that diaspora, from immigrants to actual workforce to citizenship. This is what we need, a way to amalgamate them into the culture. Every year in Harlem, they have a African Day Parade, and I have yet to see the Africans show all their glory leading that parade. But if you had the Puerto Rican Parade, you have an Irish Day Parade, all of these parades are led by that culture. So these are things you have to exercise that we no longer, you and I, will not be excused. History will not absolve us if we don't do these things. It's a long story.
You mentioned the issue about immigration, and this is something that concerns a lot of Africans who have lived in this country for years, conducted themselves in very legal, proper ways, but have in most cases not had an immigration status that they feel they're deserving of. And people are feeling hounded now because, the NYPD is obviously spying on Muslims. I mean, they're spying on everything and everybody, and we don't even know. Perhaps we won't know what they're spying on. in the years to come.
I know they're spying on.
Yeah. So, I'm sure they're watching us and spying on us. It's a waste of time, and because we're gonna stay here and speak, truth to power. But it's important to speak to Africans. How do you intend to help them solve the problem of immigration? There have been people here who've been here for 10 years. They don't have the status, and they want to integrate to the American. They feel like they're outliers. They're not integrated, they're not accepted. So many of them have to just live on the outliers forever. They can't be integrated. They have to do jobs that they think should improve, but they mostly have to walk on the ground. How do we bring people to the full realization of citizenship, dignity in this country because they've lived and paid their dues?
Well, one, you asked me how do we go about correcting the unjust criminal practices of the police department.
Yes.
And two, provide some protections for our immigrants. It's one and the same. First of all, we have to start speaking out against it openly, making it clear that we are not taking this. And what it means by not accept a protest. I'm talking about go after legislation, put people in office that makes that their agenda, put your interest in front of the political interest. It doesn't matter whether you are a citizen or not. You're a human being. You're our immigrants. You are our folks. We are you. And we do that unabashedly, as I'm saying here today. And number two, what I am doing, I talked to Brother Drame, Papa, from the Senegalese Association, and connecting them is trying to set up a actual immigration protective net, no different than other cultures do. And it takes a little work, a little effort, and collaboration, but that's where it begins. And number two, you got to get somebody in office, like myself, like my administration, like our brother Adolphus Washington, who understands not merely the needs of the African Americans, the whites, the Latinos, and et cetera in this community, but own up to our own folks and commit to protecting them. That's what I would do.
Yes. One question I have, and it's probably the final question, is how do you prevent, a lot of this mushroom, and I didn't plan to, it's not my intention to insult anybody. There's a lot of mushroom organizations giving awards to African leaders, whether they're corrupt or dictators, but one of the first things you see, if any African leader comes to town, there's his first lady, next thing they're in Harlem getting an award. I think the awards are prepared so fast from Kinko's that it doesn't take long before they are presented. Like before you know it, the wife of a president of an African country who is doing no good to his country is getting an award from, and these songs, and people are celebrating them. How do we stop this illegal? I won't say it's illegal. It's probably legal, but illegitimate, because it offends the sensibilities of a lot of Africans to know that the first people that get embraced by, African Americans in New York, for example, are these dictators and corrupt elements from Africa, whereas good people from the continent don't get the same kind of recognition. You don't see people in Harlem giving recognition. Maybe it used to happen in the past, but not anymore. To African, freedom fighters, pro-democracy activists, women rights activists, great people who are fighting on the continent. But it's very easy to see the wife of the Nigeria president get an award for Mother of the Earth. All kinds of, words I don't want to mention on the show.
Well, first of all, I don't know if that's such a good thing to be giving awards to and exonerated or ingratiated, because you clearly see many leaders throughout the African continent and the Middle East had been ingratiated by this country and are not around to receive any other awards.
Yeah.
So, put it in context. But what's important is you don't focus on what your opposition is doing. We focus on what we need and what we're going to do right here today. We focus on what we have to do. They're going to do what they do. That's irrespective. People in power are going to try to stay in power. Our job is to organize ourselves, to shrink the distance between that continent, Africa, our home, and Harlem, where the little Africa is, and how do we use the resources in Harlem, in the 15th Congressional District, the white, the the Black, the Latino, all of them, to strengthen our homeland. And we begin by doing just what we're doing here, allowing me to tell you my perspective, my political perspective, my heart, my soul. I care about my folks. And we sit down after this and say, hey, how do we right here now take advantage of the political environment in that you have people, African people in Senegal protesting someone staying in power and trying to hold on to it. And right here in this district, you have a man that's been in power here since just after man walked on the moon.
Wow. When did Charles Rangel come to power?
Just after man walked on the moon.
Tell me the year. Break it down to my level.
Break it down, meaning that he got into office, sworn in, and was elected to be the second congressman of the 15th Congressional District of New York City in 1971. Man walked on the moon in 1960.
That was the year I was born. My
really?
Goodness,
Do
yes.
you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you know, that's like he's taken my entire life.
And you know they don't use the Apollo space program has been retired.
Yes,
Columbia has been retired.
So there's no reason for him to. Oh my God.
So I ask you a question, brother.
Yes.
When fruit stays on the vine too long, what happens?
Well, you know, I come from Africa where, you know, we don't even have a chance to have any food stay on the vine more than maybe 2 days, because a lot of Africans live on less than $1 per day.
All right.
You know, so food is a problem.
Well,
and we have to make sure that anybody who is helping to take away food from Africans doesn't stay for 41 years.
Okay.
So Africans are listening to me. Like I said, this is not a campaign. It's just an opinion.
Well, here in America, from slavery, we saw the fruit, but we couldn't use it.
Wow.
So we had to wait till it rotted and fell on the ground to be able to eat it. And this particular representative is like that type of fruit, staying on the vine so long that its nourishment is all gone.
No, I think I mentioned it, that I think Charles Rangel has gone through it. You know, he's been a good guy, he's been a bad guy, and now he's a pretty ugly guy. There's no doubt about it.
Wait. Honestly speaking, he's handsome too.
Oh,
he's a handsome so-called dictator.
I'm not referring to his physical looks, you know, because that's not for me to judge. But
well, I'm here to tell you, you look good, my brother.
Oh, thank you, man. You've been hanging out too much with my mom.
Really?
So, you know, viewers, it's been great talking to Craig, and this is the kind of relationship we need on the continent. Young people who understand our aspirations, our desire for freedom. They understand the fact that Africa, and Africans in the Americas, and African Americans both in Africa, and because there are now African Americans on the continent of Africa.
Are you going to put me up when I come over?
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, have you been on the continent?
Not.
You have to. You have to. Have you checked on your DNA to find out where you come from in Africa?
Let me see something.
Yeah.
I think I'm from where you are.
All right. So you'll be from the Niger Delta region. That complicates your problem because you have a lot of oil.
I have to be honest with you. You know, my great grandfather, Luke Grady, his genealogical tree is pretty solid, and he was North Carolina's first black state legislator after slavery, and he was Sudanese, and that's what I hold on to. I'm very proud of that. And in that tradition, I'm trying to maintain.
Does anybody know where Congressman Rangel is from in Africa? Has he done his DNA? He must be the brother of Mugabe. All right, so we're gonna take a break now, you know, and it's been a great pleasure talking to Craig and on our show. And this is what we want to be doing: is to integrate Africa with our brothers here, and make sure that, you know, the road to Africa is paved with gold from the U.S. We deserve it. We deserve one of the best, you know, integration, connection, and we just can't afford to stop until that unity is finally and permanently achieved. So viewers, it's been Sahara TV talking to one of our brothers, greatest brother here, and he supports completely the struggle that's going on in Senegal, Dakar now, where, you know, a dictator has unleashed violence on his people as they seek for change. But the good news is that just as the Senegalese president Abdoulaye Wade will be possibly out of power, either he likes it or not tomorrow, we are looking forward to the end of an era here too in the U.S., which is in the 15th Congressional District in New York, where Congressman Charles Rango, his head sway for 41 years. My goodness, I can't believe that's happened. 4 decades. Anyway, we will be talking to you again as soon as we come back. And we're going to take Skype calls this time. So get your Skypes ready. It'll be Sahara.tv. We want to discuss these issues that we've been having all day long and just hear your views on our show. So do not go away. Just hang on and let's talk. It's Sahara.